My role on the show, for those of you who haven't seen it, it's pretty simple. I'm an apprentice, and I work with the people who actually do the jobs in question.
My role on the show, for those of you who haven't seen it, was always pretty simple. I was the apprentice, the extra pair of hands, the guy who walked alongside the men and women who did the work that kept America running. I wasn't the expert. I wasn't the boss. I was just there to learn, to listen, to laugh when I slipped in the mud, and to sweat when the job pushed me past my comfort zone. My responsibility was to be curious enough to ask the questions others might not, and humble enough to admit when I didn't know what I was doing. And believe me, most of the time I didn't. But what comes to your mind when you encounter a danger ahead sign while driving down a lonely road? Naturally, you'd slow down, maybe take another route, maybe rethink whether the journey was worth it. That warning, bold and bright, saves you from a mistake before you even make it. In my case, there wasn't a danger ahead sign posted anywhere. No bright flashing light told me where my career was heading, no bold warning about the choices I was about to make. Yet the signs were there all along, quiet ones, subtle ones, if only I had stopped to notice them. At first glance, I came across as nothing more than a pleasant storyteller. Someone with a steady voice and a warm smile who could spin an ordinary moment into something worth watching on primetime television. But behind that exterior was a man who wasn't afraid to poke, to prod, to debate, to challenge the assumptions people carried about work, success, and dignity. I stirred arguments, started conversations, and sparked debates that continue even today. Stay tuned, because this is not simply the story of a television host. This is about Mike Rowe's true identity, what we were warned about, and why so many people didn't listen. Mike Rowe's story begins far from the spotlight. In a modest neighborhood where hard work was more than a virtue, it was a way of life. Born in March 1962 into a working-class family in Baltimore, Maryland, Rowe's roots were firmly planted in values that stressed discipline, honesty, and perseverance. His parents, both school teachers, were the kind of people who believed in education not just as a career, but as a calling. They didn't measure life in terms of glamour or fame. For them, fulfillment came from shaping young minds, building character, and respecting the grind of daily work. Rowe grew up in a household where the dinner table wasn't about luxury, but about stories, laughter, and lessons. Evenings were spent sharing the events of the day, weekends were for family outings, and school was the centerpiece of a young boy's world. Life wasn't glamorous, but it was stable, predictable, and filled with the kind of small joys that often go unnoticed. Yet even in those ordinary surroundings, something extraordinary was quietly forming. Mike had an ear, a sharp, discerning ear for detail. Where other children might hum along to the radio or ignore the cadence of their teacher's lecture, Mike absorbed sound. He could mimic voices, replicate accents, and transform the ordinary into entertainment. Humor came naturally to him, as did storytelling. He could hold the attention of friends with impersonations, and even as a child, he seemed to understand the power of voice in shaping how people experience the world around them. At school, his teachers recognized his ability to perform without fear. Choirs and school plays became his outlet, giving him a stage long before he imagined a career in front of cameras. His performances weren't just about singing or acting, they were about presence, about the way he carried himself, about the confidence he projected. It was this foundation that set him apart from his classmates. Without realizing it, the stage was already preparing him for a much larger audience in the future. When he entered Towson University, Rowe chose to study communications, a decision that made sense for someone with his natural talents. He didn't walk into college with a plan to become a star. There was no clear roadmap to television or fame. What drew him instead was the media itself, the idea that voices, stories, and performance could shape how people understood the world. At Towson, Rowe leaned further into music and theater. He tested the limits of his vocal range, studied the craft of performance, and began to sharpen an identity built on connecting through words and sound. His journey even took him to the Opera Institute in Washington, D.C., where he trained seriously in the discipline of opera singing. Performing with the Baltimore Opera wasn't a side hobby. It was real work, the kind of challenge that demanded skill, practice, and discipline. Those who knew him then remember a young man who took the art of using his voice seriously. To him, the voice wasn't just a tool, it was an instrument capable of carrying emotion, painting pictures and shaping entire stories. And yet, for all this talent, Mike Rowe's path wasn't straightforward. He bounced between opportunities, often uncertain of where his talents might lead him. He did commercials, voiceovers, and small television spots. He worked wherever he could, creeping along the edges of the entertainment industry, often unseen, often unrecognized. He was the man behind the sound, a voice that people heard but rarely stopped to ask about. Rowe's early years in entertainment were not glamorous. He wasn't the leading man of a hit drama, nor was he making headlines in Hollywood. Instead, he was hustling, piecing together jobs that allowed him to test his skills while paying the bills. He sold his voice in places most people wouldn't even think to look: low-budget ads, small-scale narrations, and corporate videos. The irony was that he was everywhere and nowhere at once. His voice traveled further than his name ever did. But then came an unexpected twist: QVC. The television shopping network was hardly the dream job for an aspiring performer. Rowe auditioned as a joke, almost on a dare, and yet to his surprise, he landed the role. At first, it felt like another job, a paycheck, nothing more. He was asked to sell products live on air, everything from jewelry to electronics to odd household gadgets. The hours were late, the tasks repetitive, the audience invisible. Many would have seen it as a dead-end gig, but Rowe had a different approach. Instead of simply reading sales scripts, he turned the job into a performance. He brought wit, sarcasm, and humor to the screen. He improvised, riffed, and entertained. Viewers didn't just tune in to learn about the product, they tuned in to watch Rowe talk about the product. He could stretch 20 minutes of airtime about a pencil sharpener into something oddly fascinating. He connected with people not by pushing sales, but by making them laugh. QVC wasn't glamorous, but it was training ground. It taught him how to speak naturally on camera, how to think on his feet, how to bridge the gap between performance and authenticity. It gave him resilience and sharpened his improvisational edge. By the time he left, Rowe had developed not only a recognizable style, but also a deeper understanding of what it meant to engage an audience. After leaving QVC, Rowe's voice began to find a larger stage. He transitioned into narrating documentaries and television shows, a move that would cement his reputation as one of the most trusted narrators on television. His work on programs like The Most on the History Channel and Deadliest Catch on Discovery proved his unique ability to carry stories. His voice was more than sound. It was presence. Calm, commanding, trustworthy, and yet intimate, as though he were speaking directly to the viewer at home. This rare ability transformed Rowe from just another voice actor into someone audiences relied on. The early 2000s saw him become the invisible guide behind some of the most gripping television content. His face wasn't known, but his voice had become unmistakable, and yet Rowe wanted more. Narration kept him behind the curtain, hidden from the audience. He longed to step out of the shadows, to connect directly with people not just as the voice of a story, but as a character within it. That chance came in the form of a pitch from the Discovery Channel, an unusual, risky idea that would take him far from the safety of the narrator's booth. The pitch was simple but daring. What if Rowe became the apprentice in America's dirtiest, toughest, and most thankless jobs? No scripts, no rehearsals, no safety nets, just raw, unscripted work. It wasn't glamorous, and it wasn't the kind of idea networks usually pushed. But for Rowe, it was irresistible. The opportunity promised exactly what he craved, a chance to reveal not just his voice, but his whole self. He would laugh, sweat, and struggle alongside the people whose jobs defined the backbone of America. It would be risky. He might fail. He might look ridiculous, but it was real. It was honest. And it was a chance to become more than just a voice. Dirty Jobs did not begin with corporate executives carefully crafting a hit show. It began almost accidentally during a local shoot on a sheep farm. Rowe had gone there to film a straightforward segment about agriculture. The farmer, Gene, asked for his help in castrating lambs, a messy, uncomfortable, unforgettable task. The cameras captured every unscripted moment, the sweat, the discomfort, the raw reality. It was television unlike anything audiences were used to. There was no gloss, no polish, no pretense. It was real work, messy and unfiltered. Executive producer Mary Sullivan recognized the power in what they had just filmed. This wasn't just about farming or sheep. This was about showing work the way it truly was. Dirty, difficult, and essential. That moment planted the seed for Dirty Jobs. The concept was revolutionary in its simplicity. Rowe would travel across the country, step into the boots of ordinary workers and perform their tasks alongside them. There were no scripts, no rehearsals, and no attempt to glamorize. Just Rowe, the job, and the workers. The show struck a chord with viewers. It celebrated the dignity of work that usually went unnoticed. It highlighted the humor, humanity, and resilience of the people who did jobs others wouldn't dream of doing. And Rowe, with his self-deprecating humor and genuine curiosity, became the perfect guide. Dirty Jobs wasn't just a show, it was a cultural moment. It challenged stereotypes about labor, elevated the value of blue-collar work, and sparked national conversations about the meaning of work itself. From that messy day on a sheep farm, a new chapter in television began. Mike Rowe became not just a narrator, not just a host, but a symbol of respect for work that too often went unseen. His journey from opera singer to QVC salesman to the face of Dirty Jobs shocked audiences, delighted fans, and left a mark on American culture. And yet, the question remains. Was Rowe simply telling the stories of others, or was he, in his own way, warning us about something greater, about how society views work, dignity, and the value of getting dirty? That debate continues, dividing audiences, challenging traditions, and keeping his legacy alive. Because in the end, Dirty Jobs wasn't just about the jobs. It was about us. Dirty Jobs quickly became more than just television. It was a mirror showing America something it had forgotten, the dignity and grit behind everyday labor. Viewers saw septic tank cleaners, crab fishermen, coal miners, and roadkill collectors, and instead of laughing at them, audiences respected them. Rowe's humor softened the edge, but it never ridiculed. He positioned himself as the outsider, the rookie, the man who didn't know what he was doing. That humility gave space for the real heroes to shine, the workers. The show touched millions of viewers who had grown tired of glossy reality television. It wasn't about luxury lifestyles, celebrity drama, or staged competition. It was raw. It was messy. It was, in Rowe's words, bloody honest. And that honesty resonated with truck drivers on long hauls, farmers after long days, and office workers who suddenly saw the unseen backbone of their world. But the show did more than entertain. It sparked a national conversation about the skills gap. America was facing a shortage of skilled tradesmen. Electricians, welders, plumbers, and machinists were in demand, but the younger generation wasn't stepping into those jobs. Through Dirty Jobs, Rowe highlighted the opportunities being overlooked, raising questions about how society values different kinds of work. The impact of Dirty Jobs led Rowe down a new path: advocacy. He realized that celebrating hard work on television was one thing, but addressing the real problem behind the skills gap required more. In 2008, he launched the Mike Rowe Works Foundation, an organization dedicated to promoting skilled labor and supporting those who wanted to pursue careers in the trades. The foundation began offering scholarships to students entering vocational schools, trade programs, and apprenticeships. Unlike traditional scholarships focused on four-year universities, Rowe's foundation emphasized practical skills. His message was clear: there is honor in hard work, and there is opportunity in getting your hands dirty. Rowe often spoke at schools, conferences, and even congressional hearings, challenging the cultural narrative that equated success solely with college degrees. He argued passionately that America had steered too many young people away from trades, creating a shortage of workers in essential fields. Through storytelling, humor, and blunt honesty, he became a voice not just for workers but for a rebalanced understanding of what success could look like. But with influence came criticism. Rowe's straightforward views didn't sit well with everyone. Some argued that he oversimplified the issues surrounding labor shortages, or that he romanticized tough jobs without addressing the systemic issues behind them, like low pay, lack of benefits, and unsafe conditions. Rowe countered by reminding audiences that dirty jobs was never about sugarcoating work, nor was it about policy solutions. It was about respect. He insisted that the point was not to argue economics, but to showcase dignity and opportunity where others only saw drudgery. Still, debates followed him wherever he went. Was he a champion of workers, or just an entertainer using their stories? Was he a political voice or simply a cultural commentator? The truth likely lies somewhere in the middle, and perhaps that is why he remains such a compelling figure. Rowe doesn't fit neatly into a single box. As Dirty Jobs wrapped its original run, Rowe didn't disappear. He expanded his presence with new projects. He narrated dozens of shows, lent his voice to commercials, and continued advocating for skilled labor. Programs like Somebody's Gotta Do It on CNN carried the same DNA as Dirty Jobs, though with a broader lens, exploring people doing unusual or overlooked work. Rowe also embraced the digital world, creating podcasts, online videos, and social media campaigns. His storytelling ability adapted easily to new platforms. Whether narrating a commercial for Ford trucks or sharing a heartfelt story on Facebook, he kept the same balance of wit, honesty, and respect. His podcast, The Way I Heard It, became a modern twist on classic radio storytelling. Short, punchy, and surprising, each episode revealed hidden backstories of famous people or events, showcasing Rowe's gift for narrative surprise. It was a reminder that while Dirty Jobs may have made him famous, his real strength was storytelling in any form. Today, Mike Rowe is more than a television personality. He is a cultural figure who redefined how America views work. Through Dirty Jobs, he gave a platform to the voiceless, shining light on the people who kept the country running when no one else was watching. Through his foundation, he became a champion for vocational education, changing the lives of countless students. His legacy is not in glamorous awards or red carpet fame, but in something more enduring, the respect he restored for hard work. He showed that dignity doesn't come from titles or salaries, but from the pride of doing a job well, no matter how dirty it might be. And perhaps that is Mike Rowe's true identity. Not just the man who made us laugh at sheep farms and septic tanks, but the man who dared to challenge how we see ourselves, our work, and our future. From a childhood spent in Baltimore, to opera stages, late-night sales shifts at QVC, the narration booths of major networks, and finally to the muddy trenches of Dirty Jobs, Rowe's path has been anything but ordinary. Along the way, he entertained, educated, and provoked. He gave us laughter, sparked debates, and reminded us that the people who get dirty every day are the ones who keep the world turning. And so, the story continues. Because while Dirty Jobs may have ended, the work never does. And neither does Mike Rowe. Behind the television persona, Mike Rowe has always remained strikingly grounded. Unlike many TV personalities who chase celebrity lifestyles, Rowe kept his private life relatively quiet. He never married and he has no children, a fact that often sparks curiosity, but rarely invites direct answers from him. For Rowe, the focus has always been less on private glamour and more on public purpose. What he does share openly, however, are his philosophies on work and life. One of his most repeated ideas is that we've been selling the wrong dream to young people. Instead of telling them to follow passion blindly, he advises them to follow opportunity. In his words, don't chase passion, bring it with you. To him, the notion that passion alone guarantees success is misleading. He argues that passion is something you cultivate through persistence, discipline, and dedication to whatever work you choose. This philosophy resonated with many Americans who had grown frustrated with cultural pressures to pursue degrees or jobs that didn't align with the realities of the workforce. Rowe's wisdom was simple, practical, and rooted in the very jobs he highlighted on his show. In 2016, Rowe launched his podcast, The Way I Heard It. Described as a podcast for the curious mind with a short attention span, it became a hit for listeners who craved storytelling that was both educational and entertaining. Each episode offered a twist. Rowe would narrate a short, mysterious tale that seemed ordinary or unrelated, only to reveal at the end that it was about a well-known figure or event. The show highlighted his storytelling genius and his love for surprise. Fans of Dirty Jobs enjoyed this new project because it carried the same honesty and humor, but in a new form. It proved that Rowe's talent wasn't bound to one medium. Whether on television, radio, or podcasts, he could hold an audience with nothing more than his voice. Beyond the camera and microphone, Rowe also became a sought-after public speaker. He delivered talks across the country, often addressing business groups, educators, and trade organizations. His speeches blended humor with hard truths, challenging audiences to rethink their assumptions about labor, education, and success. One of his most impactful appearances came before the U.S. Congress, where he testified about the growing skills gap and the need to rethink how America encourages young people to pursue careers. His testimony wasn't filled with jargon, it was filled with stories. Real, relatable stories of people he had met while filming Dirty Jobs, stories that showed the human cost of neglecting vocational training. Rowe's advocacy wasn't confined to policy debates. He also used his online presence to amplify his message. With millions of followers on Facebook, he turned his page into a modern-day forum. He shared letters from fans, highlighted scholarship winners from his foundation, and often answered questions in long, thoughtful posts that felt like conversations rather than statements. Over time, Rowe developed a reputation as something of a cultural critic. He pushed back against the obsession with celebrity, the devaluation of trades, and the narrative that only white-collar careers led to fulfillment. Yet, he resisted being labeled a political figure. He often said he didn't belong to either side of the aisle, and his views frustrated those who wanted to put him in a box. Some called him a working-class hero. Others accused him of oversimplifying complex problems. But the reality is that Rowe's appeal lay in his refusal to fit neatly into one category. He was an entertainer, a narrator, an advocate, a philosopher, and sometimes even a provocateur. He sparked conversations that lingered long after his shows ended. Today, Mike Rowe stands as more than a television host. He's a storyteller whose voice has narrated not just television programs, but a shift in how we think about work. His foundation continues to provide scholarships, his podcast continues to entertain, and his advocacy continues to challenge cultural norms. For many, Rowe's true gift isn't just his voice or humor, it's his ability to bridge worlds. He makes the dirty jobs of septic workers as compelling as the glamorous lives of celebrities. He brings dignity to those overlooked, reminding us that work, no matter how small, shapes the world we live in, from opera stages to sheep farms. From QVC to congressional hearings, Mike Rowe's journey has been one of constant reinvention. He has proven that success doesn't always come with a clear map or a bold sign pointing the way. Sometimes it comes from embracing the messy, the uncertain, and yes, the dirty. And so, the story of Mike Rowe continues, not just in television reruns or podcast episodes, but in every young student who takes up a trade because of his influence. In every worker who feels a little more respected because their job was finally shown to the world, and in every person who realizes that hard work, in whatever form, still matters. Because in the end, the legacy of Mike Rowe isn't about fame. It's about respect. Respect for work, respect for people, and respect for the truth that sometimes the dirtiest jobs carry the deepest lessons. Mike Rowe didn't just create a successful television show, he reshaped the very concept of reality TV. At a time when reality shows often focused on drama, conflict, and celebrity lifestyles, Dirty Jobs brought authenticity. It wasn't polished, it wasn't scripted, and it certainly wasn't glamorous. Yet it was compelling. Producers, networks, and streaming platforms began to notice. Shows like Deadliest Catch, Ice Road Truckers, and other work-based reality programs found larger audiences, partly because Rowe had opened the door. He proved that people wanted to see the real world, not just a manufactured version of it. In many ways, Rowe was a pioneer of a genre that continues to thrive today. Though Dirty Jobs didn't sweep traditional Hollywood awards, Rowe himself earned recognition for his impact. He received numerous honors from trade organizations, educational groups, and labor associations. These weren't glamorous red carpet trophies. They were acknowledgments from the very people he sought to highlight, He was awarded honorary degrees from multiple universities for his work promoting vocational education. He was celebrated by skilled trade unions for his advocacy, and his foundation's scholarships became a living award, shaping the futures of thousands of students who might otherwise have been overlooked. For Rowe, these honors mattered more than television ratings. They were proof that his work had moved beyond entertainment into lasting cultural change. Even today, Rowe remains active across multiple platforms. His podcast, The Way I Heard It, continues to gain listeners worldwide. His foundation expands its reach year after year, offering new programs and scholarships. And his voice, deep, steady, and instantly recognizable, still narrates shows, commercials, and documentaries. Yet he has never chased the trappings of celebrity. He lives simply, spends time with his dogs, and continues to tell stories in ways that connect with everyday people. Unlike many television figures who fade when the spotlight dims, Rowe thrives outside of it, precisely because his career was never built on fame alone. It was built on connection. Looking back at Rowe's unconventional path, certain lessons stand out. Flexibility matters. From opera to QVC to dirty jobs, Rowe adapted to opportunities instead of clinging to one rigid dream. Humility opens doors. His willingness to look foolish on camera made viewers respect him more, not less. Respect is powerful. By honoring workers who were invisible to most of society, he gave audiences a new lens to see value. Passion follows hard work. Rowe's philosophy, don't follow passion, bring it with you, remains one of his most enduring insights. These lessons, simple yet profound, explain why his influence continues to grow even as television itself evolves. Perhaps what truly defines Mike Rowe is not just his career, but his voice, both literally and figuratively. His narration has guided viewers through the mysteries of science, the history of Earth, and the messy realities of hard labor. But beyond narration, his voice has been a steady call for respect, for balance, and for re-evaluating what success means in a culture obsessed with status. In the years ahead, Rowe's story will likely be remembered not only for dirty jobs, but for something larger. The reminder that work is not just a way to earn a living, it's a way to define who we are, to shape our communities, and to build our future. And if there is one truth Rowe leaves us with, it is this: the dirtiest hands often point to the cleanest consciences.